The mystery began with Jack and Christina's secret wedding on May 12, 1947, which came after a suspicious 2-week disappearance from her family home. Christina's father, a Polish immigrant, initially opposed the marriage because the groom was not a Roman Catholic. Though the 26-year-old Jack Kettlewell converted, the couple's elopement was unsettling for Christina's family, who couldn't understand the looming presence of his best friend, Ronald Barry. Barry, formerly known as Ronnie Ciuffo, came to Canada from northern Italy and tried to establish himself in the construction and insurance businesses, to little success. The 28-year-old professional ballroom dancer owned a cottage in Seven Falls, about 40 kilometers north of Orillia, Ontario, where he would later join the Kettlewells for their honeymoon. The Kettlewells spent a few days of their honeymoon in an apartment in Toronto, then joined Barry at his cottage River Villa, which sat along the banks of the Seven Falls, around 40 kilometers outside of Orillia, Ontario on May 17th. On May 20th, the cottage caught fire, and while Jack was found dazed by Ronnie inside, Christina was nowhere to be seen. She had somehow ended up face down in a shallow pool along the Severn, still clad in her floral pajamas. The coroner's report states that she had drowned, with codeine in her stomach. The authorities said that Christina was already dead by the time the final debris of her honeymoon cottage burned to the ground. The reports clearly stated that there were no burn marks or signs of violence on her body. The inquest revealed a number of inexplicable and dubious money transactions connecting back to Barry at a time when he was broke. Barry was named as the beneficiary on 2 separate $5,000 life insurance policies for Jack and Christina, taken out before they eloped. The policies carried a double indemnity provision, meaning 2 times the amount would be paid out to Barry in the case of accidental death. When adjusted for today's inflation, it would work out to $260,000. He also purchased $5,000 of insurance on the cottage, or $65,000 today. Jack turned over his wartime gratuities to his friend, and a ring he borrowed from a married friend to propose to Christina was never recovered after her death. It was worth about $13,000 in today's dollars. But why did Jack cut his family out of his will, hand earnings to Barry, and let his friend tag along on his honeymoon? Jack's weak answers to these questions did not satisfy Crown lawyer Hope, but a statement he made to police after the fire offered a small window into a possible motivation being love. During the police investigation, Jack admitted to a long-time affair with Barry, who he would frequently go on long holidays up north with. The two were closer than brothers, and the rumor mill spun about the two of them. It remains unclear whether Jack and Ronnie were actually lovers, or if this was forced out of him by the police in the immediate aftermath of the fire. Ronnie admitted that the two had sex, but this was a brief affair, and that he broke it off long ago. Jack testified that he was pressured into the admission, saying, "That is what the police were trying to make." Barry was instrumental in helping the Kettlewells elope, the inquest heard. Could it be because he was also the keeper of Christina's dark secret? On April 6, Easter Sunday, a suicide letter revealed Christina had allegedly tried to kill herself by poisoning, the inquest heard. Jack said his fiancée was ill that day, but what he did not know is that she had written a suicide letter addressed to Barry detailing her uncertainty of receiving a proposal, according to his testimony. "This will be the best way out, as I cannot bear to see another girl have him," the note said. A handwriting expert testified that the suicide notes were undoubtedly written by Christina. At the end of April, she made an attempt on both her life and Jack's, as per the suicide notes. "When you love someone, you really love him, and I know there is no one for me but Jack, and if I cannot have him, I do not intend anyone else to. I waited, as you might say, in the hope that Jack would ask me to marry him, but I now realize I am just a passing fancy," she wrote in another letter to Barry. The final letter was written the day before her death and addressed to Mrs. Thomas, the woman who owned the home in Mimico, where she briefly stayed with Jack. Christina asked Barry to mail it. Ronnie is in the boat outside somewhere, the note said. By the time he gets back, everything will be all over with. He must have been afraid something would happen because he is staying an extra day to make sure we go back to Toronto with him. Barry saved suicide notes from the fire and did not tell Jack about Christina's disturbing behavior until it came out in the inquest. Jack suggested his tall, dark-haired best friend was operating in the shadows to protect him. Despite the coroner finding that Christina drowned, that the suspicious fact that she was found drowned in 9 inches of water meant that the jury delivered an open verdict in the case, deciding neither on whether foul play was involved in Christina's death or accident. Some say that Christina was suicidal and had tried to kill herself earlier. But that was all they could find. No one was able to find out if any foul play was involved in her death. The question of her death still remains unsolved.